we have quite literally been lied to about everything. They have created this Truman Show type simulation to keep the general public distracted from the truth, distracted from the biblical events that are actually happening in our world. And one of these events is actually the war in Iraq. Everybody meet Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was an ancient Sumerian king who ruled in what we now know is modern-day Iraq. And he was a 17 to 20 foot giant. He was a demigod, which means he was half human and half god. Now, if you know your Bible, and if you followed my stories before on ancient Egyptian history and how we've been lied to, you know that these giants actually existed, and they were demonic human hybrids that ruled and ravaged the earth. Now, Gilgamesh was a barbaric king. He built up and ruled over the city of Uruk, which is, again, modern-day Iraq. Now, you and I were taught that this is all just mythology, just like the ancient Egyptian half-animal, half-human gods that we read about. But when you read the Bible, you understand that this all, in fact, actually happened. So what does he have to do with the war in Iraq? This brings us to 2003, when German archaeologist Jörg Fassbinder was digging in modern-day Iraq, and he thought he found the city of Uruk.
Gilgamesh was simply a figment of myth. That was until Jörg Fassbinder and his team of archaeologists, using modern technology to look deep into the ground, discovered an entire ancient city beneath the desert, astonishingly laid out just as the city of Uruk, over which Gilgamesh had purportedly reigned, was described in the epic. There were houses and gardens and fields alongside an incredibly sophisticated system of canals, leading archaeologists to describe the site as Venice in the desert. More importantly, on the outskirts of the ancient city was what appeared to be a burial site, which archaeologists believed to be the tomb of the ancient king.
So Jörg goes to the authorities, tells them he thinks that he found the city of Uruk and possibly the tomb of Gilgamesh, and 5 months later, we invade Iraq. Now here's where it gets crazy, because not only did we invade Iraq immediately after his findings, our military builds a base directly over the ruins. Anyway, it's not a secret that the USA established a base in the old Babylonian city, destroyed some historical artifacts, and also took with them many of the artifacts. They constructed buildings and helicopter landing pads in the ancient city. It's not a secret that they were searching for something very important.
There were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. And something's wrong. It's a whole world of deceit. We're going into Iraq to get artifacts, not to get anything but artifacts. That was the most important thing, they said.
But which artifacts?
I don't know. They just said artifacts. There were things in Iraq that were so old that we had to go get. Bush wanted those artifacts. It was very important.
Did we get them? And if so, where did they go?
We got them. They said they got everything they needed from that country.
Where is it?
I don't know. We have it.
Saddam Hussein was building a massive reconstruction of Babylon near the ancient city. Was he trying to hide something huge? Is that why the US decided to invade Iraq so fast and acquire the ancient relic? Everything in our world is biblical. Everything. All of the wars that are fought are biblical. It goes back to the Bible. It goes back to the demonic forces that are still alive today, the evidence of the demonic forces that are all around our world that they don't want you and I to know about. And if you go on the Department of State's website and type in Gilgamesh, you are actually brought to the formal request for the ancient tomb of Gilgamesh. They were requesting his body from the burial site. So when we invaded Iraq, we went in and just took it all, and we actually had to return it. There's even an email from WikiLeaks that says requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. Our entire world is biblical. All over our world is evidence of the Bible, evidence of the giants, evidence of the Nephilim, evidence of all these ancient civilizations that are written about in the Bible. But unfortunately, our world is controlled by Satan. Our government is ran by Satan. So what does our government do? It comes in and it covers it up. Welcome to part 2 of the real reason that we invaded Iraq, because you and I have been lied to our entire lives. In part 1, we talked about how an archaeologist discovered the ancient city of Uruk in modern-day Iraq, and then he discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh, and coincidentally, a few months after, we invaded Iraq. Well, buckle up, because this goes so much deeper than just his tomb. Now for this video, we have to go back to the days immediately following the flood, and this brings us to Genesis 10. Genesis 10 is the genealogy of Noah. Genesis 10:1 tells us that the three sons of Noah were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Down it says Ham had Cush, and then Cush had Nimrod. So Nimrod in the Bible is Noah's great-grandson. Now why am I talking about Nimrod? Because Nimrod is Gilgamesh. In the Bible, we learn that Nimrod established a very large kingdom. He was essentially the first king of the world, and it also says that he ruled over all of the other sons of Noah. Now, because of this, there were many different peoples that would write about Nimrod. It was their personal account of who Nimrod was. The Babylonians wrote about him, the Assyrians wrote about him, the Hittites wrote about him. It says even in Palestine, tablets have been found with this man's name on them. He was obviously the most popular hero in the ancient Near East. And of course, the Sumerians wrote about him in the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'm going to go back to Genesis 10 to find out about Nimrod's kingdom. This is Genesis 10:8, and it says up at the top, he began to be a mighty one on the earth. We'll go back to that verse later. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Verse 10, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. That's southern Mesopotamia. From that land, he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, and there's more. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce them. Let's bring that verse to life a little bit. Here is a visual of Nimrod's kingdom. Down here, we have the Tower of Babel. We have Uruk, where he was found, or Erech in the Bible. The city of Ur, which is actually where Abraham was born, and then the land of Shinar. So pretty large kingdom. We're going to go back to Genesis 10:8 because it says he began to be a mighty one on the earth. This is the exact same phrase that God uses when he describes the giants in Genesis 6. So it says, there were giants on the earth in those days and also afterwards. So God is specifically telling us that the giants, these demonic hybrid beings, survived the flood. When the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them, those were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. The Greek origin of the words describing Nimrod are exactly the same as the Greek origin of the words God used to describe the giants in Genesis 6. It is worth mentioning that the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, also says that Nimrod began to be a giant upon the earth. Now, Nimrod is talked a lot about in the book of Jasher, in the Apocrypha. And before anybody comes for me and says that we shouldn't read the Apocrypha, this is in the Bible, Joshua 10. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? 2 Samuel 1, indeed, it is written in the book of Jasher. The authors of the Bible are referring us to other additional sources so we can find out additional information. Back to Jasher, it says, and they brought him offerings, and he became their lord and king, and they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar, and Nimrod reigned over the earth and over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel. And all the earth was of one tongue, we know this, and words of union, but Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord. Here's what's interesting. He was more wicked than all the men that were before him from the days of the flood until those days. And when you read about Nimrod, this guy was disgusting. He was wicked. He was perverted. He mated with animals all the time because he couldn't control himself. He was absolutely deplorable. Now, Nimrod actually wore the garments that Adam and Eve wore in the Garden of Eden. They were passed down to Noah, who kept them on the ark, and then he passed them down to his sons, and then obviously his sons passed them down to Nimrod. And it says here, he gave them those garments through the love for him, and Nimrod grew up, and when he was 20 years old, he put on the garments. And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments, and God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yes, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered the animals on them before the Lord. Now, there is no written explanation for how Nimrod became Nephilim, how he became a demonic giant. So this is my personal conclusion based upon what I've read. We know that Nimrod, when he was ruling, he did not go in the ways of the Lord. He was more wicked than all the other men, but in his early life, he was obedient to the Lord. And when he put on the garments from Adam and Eve, God gave him power and might. So I think that all just got to his head. I think as he aged, he started to abandon the Lord and he started to serve Satan. And what does Satan do? He takes everything that is God's and he twists it in his own perverse and evil way. So I think as Nimrod started to serve Satan, Satan used that power that God had given him and somehow transformed him into this Nephilim, into this demonic giant. and a completely wicked, horrible, grotesque man. Now, because he was Nephilim, he had access to Nephilim technology, and this is where we get into the conversation of the Stargate, which is a demonic portal. This is where it gets kind of crazy, and I know this is going to be a lot to take in for some people, but y'all, the truth is that we live in a spiritual world. There are angels and demons all around us at all times. They're just in a different dimension than ours. So beings like Nimrod, who were almost 2/3 demon, had access to all of this demonic technology that was beyond what we could even imagine. Now this brings us to the Ziggurat of Ur, which is located in modern day Iraq. Now this is just an artist's depiction of what we think it might have looked like. This is what remains, and it was believed to have a Stargate buried underneath. This is pretty much what they look like. It's a portal to another dimension. And so all of the demonic rulers, you know, in the ancient civilizations, they had access to all this. They had this technology, and God tells us this in the Bible. And so when that archaeologist found the tomb, found the city of Uruk, you know, that's a red alert for our government, because there's a lot of fallen angels that rule this world, and they are in power in our world. I'm not going to say any more than that. So when they got word of Gilgamesh or Nimrod, they knew what they were looking for. But who was in their way? Saddam Hussein. Because Saddam actually thought that he was a reincarnated version of Nebuchadnezzar. In the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, Saddam Hussein became obsessed with the Babylonian ruler Nebuchadnezzar. Saddam saw himself as a modern reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar, and to prove it, he spent millions building a massive reconstruction of Babylon. In addition, he actually tried to reconstruct the Ziggurat of Ur, so that means that he had the technology to the Stargate that was known to be below. Hussein either was able to get the Stargate working or learned something important from it, and Big Daddy America got concerned. The Bush administration recognized that Hussein had some very, very valuable, relevant information concerning the ancient history of the planet, either technology or text basically confirming this, and he was going to release this to the public. I think that was a big part of the reason why the Bush administration went into Iraq, to stop him from revealing this information, and to also, of course, this is what I think, control it themselves. Now, all of this sounds crazy until you actually do some digging, and you find on the CIA's website a project called Stargate. Now, this goes back many, many years, because there are many Stargates all around the world. This document obviously is from 1993, and it covers the discussion of paranormal activity. The investigations described in this report involve a class of human capabilities generally referred to as parapsychological or paranormal phenomena. There are two general types, informational and energetic. There's a lot of weird stuff in this report, and it takes some time to read through, but you can find it yourself on CIA.gov. There's this story as well from 1928. You can find this on TikTok. This man was digging underneath Egyptian pyramids. He found a Stargate, went through it, and he actually brought people with him. Time was different, so he thought he was gone for only like an hour, but he was gone for 3 days. So when he went through the Stargate or the portal, he actually went back in time to when the pyramids were being built, and he saw UFOs carrying the stones for the pyramids. He saw giants, he saw aliens, he saw Nephilim, he saw all of it, and he said it was beautiful and lush and green, and he actually saw conveyor belts. I mean, they had electricity, they had power, they had technology back then from demons, and there's many stories like this actually. There are Stargates all over our world because our world was inhabited by demons and demonic technology, and we have pyramids all over the world, and it is no coincidence that America, part of the Grand Canyon is closed off. A lot of national parks are closed off to the public, and it's a huge reason why we are lied to, because it goes back to the Bible. So we all know what a Stargate looks like, right? It's a portal. And we also know that our government went into Iraq and took the Stargate that was under the Ziggurat of Ur. This is CERN.